Thank you for joining us. My name is Rachel Priesman Marquez, and I work at the Indianapolis Public Library. I'm here with Jay Coles, contributor to the book Black Boy Joy, and the author of Tyler Johnson Was Here, as well as the newly released Things We Couldn't Say, as well as many, many other works. You can place these books on hold either in their physical copies, on Overdrive, or Axis 360. Thanks for being here today, Jay. I'm sure your schedule is super busy with your recent book release.
Yeah, I've got a lot going on, but it's all good stuff. And so I'm excited to do those things. And I'm excited, most importantly, to be here and talking with you about those books. I kind of wanted to just, as you were like listing those titles, to quickly show all of my, work. But yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about them today.
Awesome. Well, I guess I'll just start off with my first question. What are you reading right now?
What am I reading right now? Gosh, the title of this book that I just started just left me, and I'm reading it for a blurb. I'm blurbing it. It's The Undead Truth of Us, which isn't out for, I think, a couple more seasons. I'm also reading Darkroom Etiquette by Robin Rowe, which is also out. I'm also reading it to blurb. All the books that I'm reading are usually books that I'm reading to like submit a blurb for it. I rarely get time to just read for fun these days. Maybe one day I'll be able to just read for fun. Not that the books that I'm reading for blurbs aren't fun. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to jump ahead in my questions, but that leads me. I saw that you did a virtual tour for the Things We Couldn't Say with a bunch of authors. So what's your favorite part of being an author, and have you ever been starstruck?
Oh, absolutely. Like when I first started out in this career, when, my debut novel came out, one of the first events I was able to do was Y'all West, which, if you know anything about Y'all West, the people who actually put on Y'all West are a lot of the really like big named white authors in our, industry. And so actually, like a really cool thing that happened there was there was like this author hangout that I was invited to, where all the authors of Y'all West got together at someone's house and just like, had a cocktail party essentially. And I remember like kind of just nervously walking in, looking around like at all these people, some authors that I recognized, like, and some I didn't. And I was sitting at a table all by myself, and all of a sudden, like, Jenny Han comes over and Veronica Roth, and they're like, "Hey, are you Jay Coles?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Oh, we love your book cover." And they talked to me for like a lot of the night. And I will always remember that moment because I was so like starstruck. I was like, "Oh my gosh, like you guys are like Jenny Han and Veronica Roth, and I'm like this debut author." So yeah, it's always like, and it was just really incredible to like see how humble like other authors are in this industry, and I feel really welcomed and like I have a place at the table. Yeah, and my like virtual tour for Things We Couldn't Say, I mean, to talk with all those people like Farida and Adam Silvera, and it was just a lot of fun.
That's so awesome. So related to that, what's your favorite compliment you've ever gotten on a book that you've written?
My favorite compliment about I mean, I don't know if it was something super profound. I just think I remember being doing a school visit, and like this really small, like middle schooler came up to me and was like in tears. And he was like, "Thank you for writing a book where I got to see myself." And I started crying, and to me that was something that really moved me and motivated me to continue, writing more.
That leads me to like kind of a bigger question that I have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you write about like some really difficult topics to talk about: interracial relationships, police brutality, grief, and you've stated in interviews that you're drawing from personal experience on these things. Does it feel cathartic to write about difficult? And when you're writing about them, do you have an audience in mind? Like, is there a certain person that you envision when you're writing these?
That's a great question. I think for me, ultimately, like a lot of my writing starts out with just me wanting to like know myself. Like when I sit down and write something, I'm usually trying to like piece together something in a way of like healing part of myself, or understanding part of myself better, because I can be very detached from myself or my life or my experience, a lot of the time. And writing is a way for me to be in tune with myself and to really like know myself in a deeper sense. And so when I was writing my debut novel, Tyler Johnson Was Here, it was very much like I guess I'm just trying to process grief and like engage with a grief that like I feel like incapable of navigating apart from writing. And so actually putting things down on the page or on the screen initially was super helpful for me to even like take steps forward in my grief, to be able to like process in a healthy sense like the things that I've been feeling and the things that I've buried over the years related to um, the loss that inspired all the events in Tyler Johnson Was Here. And so I think that's true too for all my other things that I've written, including my recent sophomore novel, Things We Couldn't Say. For that book, it was not as intense on the like grief scale, but there's still some things that I was wanting to piece together and understand about myself through, you know, having this fictional, in a sense, character go on this journey of self-discovery, where it actually helped me discover more of myself along the way too. Really, really helpful. It's almost like another form of like counseling or therapy in a lot of ways to just write young adult stories. And a lot of times I'm always envisioning like the teen version of myself, and what I needed in those moments. And in a way, Teen Jay is still in here, and I'm wanting to speak to him through my writing.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes so much sense. So, can you tell me a bit? Like, I know you work from personal experience, but when you're like setting up your novels, can you tell me a bit about like how you get the ideas for them? Does it just pop into your head and you just instantly start typing, or do you ruminate on it and it's a slow burn? Like, what is that like? And do you usually have a couple ideas going on at once? Tell me a bit about that.
Gosh, my brain's always so like, like there's so many things that I want to like write about, or like I think about just, in a moment. Um, and so very often I'm starting multiple projects at once. Like I'll have like a YA going, or like a middle grade, and I'll start a YA science fiction. And I'm like, okay, well, where do I feel like I want to invest my time now? Like I'll start, all these little projects, but then where do I feel most led to actually investing, time and energy in the characters? And it really comes down to like, which character do I like think the most about, or which group of characters, or which story do I find myself dreaming about, or find myself like asking myself questions more about, and I go from there. And oftentimes like those questions that I have, or that like desire that I have to get to know a certain group of characters in a deeper sense, is really the first thing that kind of like draws me in to um, a story. And so I kind of like sit with those characters in my head for a very long time to like essentially like understand them and understand their stories and the way that they kind of interconnect. And then I do an activity called character interviews. And so I kind of sit down and I like think about these characters in my head and essentially like interview them, like, and it sounds weird. I know, like it sounds like kind of wild, but I essentially just ask myself like, okay, like what is this character's like greatest desire, greatest intention? What are they fearing? Like, what are they pursuing in life and in the story? And those things make me feel even more excited about where these characters are headed, or even what the plot is. Because I want my stories to be more character driven first than like plot driven. Because I feel like if the characters are like really well rounded, it doesn't really matter what the plot is, because people are going to be invested because they care about the characters. And so I spent a lot of time kind of sitting with them in my head for a very long time before I ever, think about plot or where the story's headed.
That makes total sense. I read Tyler Johnson Was Here. I'm still on hold for your other one, but I, as a queer Latina, I was obsessed with Ivy. I was like, I have to hear about her. I want a whole book about her. She's adorable and the best.
Yeah.
And so sweet. So
she
sweet.
is. Oh no, I love Ivy.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about when you're not writing diverse books, you're championing for them. What do you think that YA is still missing, and what kind of gaps do you think still really need to be filled there?
Oh man, I feel like there's so many.
Yes.
There's so many gaps, and I mean, I just want to see more stories and more. I mean, that actually, this kind of leads me into talking more about this anthology right here, the Black Boy Joy Anthology, where when this idea, this concept was, kind of thrown out to me as like, hey, would you want to participate in this? I was like 100% like no questions asked. I was like, I didn't get to write a whole lot of stories about joyful Black kids, kids who just get to exist in like the purpose of the story isn't their struggle or their pain or trauma, which even though like I've written books about that and I will continue to write books about the hard parts about being a person of color in this country. That isn't the entirety of like who we are. That isn't the entirety of our story. And so I just want to see more stories that champion the joy of kids of color and teens of color. And especially the nuances and intersectionality there, like, with queerness or with like different religions and or different worldviews or perspectives. I feel like one thing that I got to explore in writing Things We Couldn't Say was the intersectionality of like spirituality, queerness, Blackness, and like how all those things kind of like really shape the main character in very, very interesting ways. And kind of this internal pool of like, who am I? Like, what do I believe? Like, what do I want from my life? And I've not seen a lot of stories that like, I don't know, really deal with those things like together, and not saying that I'm like, the first one on the scene and everyone needs to, whatever, but I would love to see more intersectionality and nuance in characters, because though we have like so many diverse books out, though we have, an influx of voices that are new and marginalized, there's not nearly as many out as we need. And everyone has like a very unique perspective. And so I just want to see more of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so in an interview with So Booking Cool, you said that your first few books were bad. What was the first book that you wrote, or what was the first piece even that you wrote where you were like, wow, this is really good?
Actually, I would have to say it was Tyler Johnson Was Here. Like everything that I had written before that, I was like, this is bad, or like this is like not very good. I actually saw this tweet that reminded me of like one of the first books that I attempted to write, where I like wrote it and then it was like maybe 200 pages long, and the very last line of the book was, and then he woke up. And just signify that like the entire story had been a dream. And I thought I was like the coolest. I was like, I invented this, I started this, but then like, no, everyone and their mother was literally doing that, during that time period. And so obviously that didn't go anywhere. So Tyler Johnson was the first book that I wrote, or like had a first draft, and I was like, man, I actually think this could go somewhere, and send it to some friends, and they really championed it and really believed in the story. And from there got an agent who was excited about it, and they got published, sold within 2 weeks. It was like boom, just kind of crazy. And that kind of just further confirmed that like like that feeling that I had was right. I had some projects that I had written that I was like, oh, this could be a really cool thing. Like I had written a YA book before Tyler Johnson Was Here that I actually submitted to my current agent first. Then she was like reading it and was really enjoying it. But I had actually had finished Tyler Johnson Was Here, and I was like, hey, would you want to see this also? And she actually read it finished reading Tyler Johnson Was Here first before the other book that I sent her, and wanted to sign me. And so nothing ever happened with that book. I don't even know if she ever finished reading it, but I was excited about that project. But I knew that it wasn't the right project for my debut because I wrote only white characters in it. Because I was like, this is what's going to sell. Like, this is what people want, which is very different than Tyler Johnson Was Here, which actually was my debut. So.
What do you think contributed to that? Do you think it was like the industry as a whole, or growing up did you grow up in Indiana?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like what
No.
what do you think really compelled you to feel that way? And like, if you had to pin it down to a couple things.
Yeah. I will say one thing was my exposure to books. Like when I was exposed to books, like especially, middle grade and white books, like not a lot of them featured Black people or Black characters or characters of color. Or if they did, they were like side characters who were just like there for comedic relief or to fulfill some sort of purpose, to kind of like prolong or help the main character, the main white character who was the hero, like along on their journey. And so I was like, well, if this is what people are reading, this is like all that I'm exposed to. Maybe if I like kind of just copy paste that, in I'll be successful. Maybe like I'll have success in that if I just like copy paste that, essentially. And then like also that was really affirmed by, teachers that I had, when I, there wasn't a single teacher that like ever told me to share my authentic story, like stories about people that look like me or people that come from places that I've come from. And instead, like when I would write characters for class, or stories for class that featured white characters, it was always like 100% amazing, like whatever. And not saying they had like even malicious intent, but it was very much obvious that like I will be rewarded if I conform to whiteness and if I essentially like prop up, this narrative of like white people are only allowed to be the heroes and white straight people are only allowed to be the heroes. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to backpedal a little bit to where you were talking about Tyler Johnson Was Here and how that was the first thing that you were really like, this has legs and can go somewhere. What was different about that writing process than your other writing up to that point? Or generally about the ideas? Do you think that it was that you were writing Black characters?
For sure, I think that was part of it. I also felt like I could connect with the characters and the story. Like it was so like again, like there's a reason why on the back of the book for Tyler Johnson Was Here, it says based off of events in my life, because it was so personal. And so like because of that reason alone, like I had like a connection as opposed to anything else I had written before that, because I was like, I'm writing strictly for other people to almost like sell out in a sense to get published or to get my name out there. But I finally wrote something that like is for me and is for, for me to heal and process and like, and, I feel like a deep emotional connection to it. And so of course, like that would be like the thing that I would just kind of want to run with essentially. It's like, this would be the thing that I want to be my debut because I feel like this personal connection. So that would be like the main difference between that and like anything else I had ever written.
Yeah, absolutely. So with both of your now published novels, how did you know the book was done?
It's funny that you asked that because I think every time I reread both my books, I'm like, this book isn't done. And I'm like, there's no way that I can do sequels for them because I just don't have that much to say about either of those books. Maybe I do if I thought about it more, but actually I was like, man, like I could have added, another 5 chapters to things we couldn't say, because there's so many things that I was like, oh, I could have explored this in a deeper way, or I could have like expounded upon this more. And for Tyler Johnson Was Here, I know for those people who've already read it, like at the very end, you're like, what happens? You're kind of left. And I'm like, for some people, they're like, oh, I really appreciate the way that you kind of left it up for reader interpretation. And some people are like, no, I want like a clear, like, this is what happened to this character. This is what happened to this character. And I'm like, looking back, I'm like, man, I kind of probably agree. Like I wish I would have gone back and actually like added more to that. And so like I don't know, like I don't even know if that's like the question that you're asking, but I feel like when I look back at my books, I'm like, this isn't done. Like it's as done as it can be because it's already published, but there's so much that I would totally add.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. So you've also said that you make playlists for all of your books.
Oh,
Tell me
yeah.
about those. Where can we find them? And like, what's your process for making them? Do you use songs that you've already found and loved and listened to while you were writing, or do you find new music for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I need to put them on my website, put the playlist up there. But right now they're just on my Spotify account. I create playlists, as I'm writing books, as a way to help me even connect with the characters, help me get to an emotional place, where I need to be to write a certain scene sometimes. Like if I'm writing a party scene, I'm gonna want to listen to some party music. If I'm writing like a sadder scene or like um, you know, like a sadder, melancholic kind of scene, then I'll put on, some sad music, piano music or something like that, just to get in the feel of what I'm trying to write. But sometimes I even like, in my character interviews that I mentioned earlier, like I'll think through like, oh, what kind of music does this character like, or like, does this character even like music, or as a way of like understanding their personality in a deeper way. And I just like kind of compile songs randomly and add it to the playlist, just so like, oh yeah, when I'm writing about this character, I'll play these certain songs to help me know this character in a deeper way. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of me using songs that I am familiar with, but also songs that like are very new. So like, luckily on Spotify, there's so many resources to find like new music and like to discover new music. I mean, one thing that they do every week is like a Discover Weekly, section, and I'll kind of click on that and like find a bunch of new music for me to like, listen to as I write. And for things we couldn't say, there's actually like several playlists included in the book. And so I actually compiled all those songs that are mentioned in the book into a separate playlist, like an official Things We Couldn't Say playlist. That was really cool. Actually, when I was writing that book, one playlist that I went back to over and over again, Spotify has this playlist that they created called Top 100 Most Beautiful Songs in the World. And I listened to that like over and over again. There's some really beautiful songs on that playlist. Some really, really sad ones too, though.
Okay. I'll have to check it out. All right. Now I've got to ask you some questions about your social media. In your Twitter bio, you say that you like ketchup on pizza. So when did you discover that you like that? And what kind of pizza do you put ketchup on?
Yes. So I discovered that when I was a kid. I was in elementary school. Um, all my friends would dip their pizza in like ranch dressing or like something else. Um, but I always was a huge fan of ketchup. Like I love ketchup on anything. French fries, like grilled cheese sandwiches, like pizza, like whatever. Like I'll take ketchup with it. I don't know, maybe that's weird, but I was like, there's something about it that's like it's like a sweet and salty kind of thing when you're eating pizza. Maybe you don't want your pizza to be sweet and salty. And I'll put on like any pizza. Like I'm vegetarian, so like the pizza that I eat is normally like veggie pizza or just cheese pizza. So I don't know what it's like on like pepperoni or like anything else, but and I'm also like a thick crust or a deep dish person. I don't like thin crust. And so yeah, I'll kind of just pour it on my pizza, or I'll dip it. 10 out of 10 will recommend. It's not for everyone though. I get it. I didn't realize actually that it was like, it sounded as weird as people have made it seem like, because I was like, it's just tomatoes. Like, it's also in the pizza sauce, like, but I'm sure there's different ingredients in ketchup. So
Yeah, I'd never heard of anyone doing that. And so I had a lot of questions initially, like, yeah, in addition to the sauce already on the pizza,
yeah.
like a white pizza, like a
hmm
cream-based sauce.
Sure. Yeah. I've never tried it on like a cream-based sauce, or like, but I've tried it on like barbecue sauce pizza, or like a just a regular.
Okay, well, I'll have to check it out and see what it's all about.
Yeah, let me know for sure.
I will. All right. So, as a former Muncie resident myself, I have so many great things to say about Muncie. And if someone was visiting from out of town, what's the one thing that they have to do in Muncie?
The one thing that you have to do if you're visiting, um, my answer is actually not even like this very glamorous thing that we have, but it's like I want people to see the south side of Muncie. Like, I feel like, when you come to Muncie, you see campus, right? You see Ball State's campus, and you see like this really well put together side of town. And then you cross the tracks to go to the south side, and it looks like a whole different world, a whole different city. And it's like, no, it's just the south side of Muncie, right? Like, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of like, addiction, and like a lot of things going on there that like feels really, really dark and heavy. And they've gone forgotten for a long period of time. And so I would just show people like, hey, like, I know you see all this really cool architecture, and really cool stuff on the the north side of Muncie, or like the central side of Muncie where campus is, but um let's take a trip to the south side. And there's some cool restaurants on the south side of Muncie too, and ice cream places, and but people unfortunately don't cross those tracks very much.
Yeah, I actually used to live over by Tupitong, and
Mhm.
yeah, and the divide between town and gown, as they would say, is
Yep.
exponential.
Yep.
And Muncie proper has some really, really wonderful
Yeah.
things to offer.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to stop at the caffeinery, really, really good coffee shop, really good owners. They now just started selling matcha, which, matcha is my like obsession. So, in addition to ketchup on pizza. Um, so,
Cool. Okay, and my last question is just a perfunctory scroll from your Twitter leads me to believe that you are a big Paramore and Hayley
oh
Williams fan,
gosh. Yes.
as should everybody be. So after this interview and everybody clicks away, what is one song that everyone needs to listen to?
Gosh, I love Paramore so much. I mean, when you read the acknowledgments in things we couldn't say, I think Haley Williams and Paramore, because without them, gosh, my life would be very, very different. I mean, they've saved me in multiple ways. Very, very thankful for them. I'm saying this like they're going to be listening to this, maybe they will. Be awesome. Um, yeah, but I'd say one song by Paramore that I'd recommend everyone listen to, that um, was also a song that was in Twilight, was Decode. um, Very, very good song. Also, Misguided Ghosts. That was actually the song that like when Gio, the main character of Things We Couldn't Say, popped in my head. That was actually the first song that I thought of for his personality, was Misguided Ghosts. It's a very like very chill, just like acoustic guitar and voice song, but very, very beautiful and haunting.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jay. I really appreciate you taking your time to meet with us again. And so everybody check out Jay's books, and again, in physical copies, Overdrive and Axis 360, and go listen to Decode after this. So
Yes.
thank you, Jay, so much.
Thank you.